Hello, my name is Armand Martin, and I'm the author of the book The Quantum Divine Nexus, a journey to unify science and spirituality to unveil life's purpose. Today I want to dive into a topic that is one of my favorite topics, which I also cover extensively in my book. It's consciousness, the mind, or maybe also called the soul. Now, you surely know that there's a lot of buzz still going on, while science is telling us or trying to convince us that the consciousness is purely explainable through scientific means, that it's an emerging property out of the brain, and that everything that we are, what we feel, what we think can be explained similar to a computer. And on the other hand, we have the people that say it's not true. Our consciousness, our mind, or should we say our soul, is much more than just physical parameters and calculations. Now, what most people don't know is that there are really many mysteries still open. It's absolutely the case that the consciousness is not a really proven concept in science. There are many, many assumptions. Many of them, frankly speaking, don't make sense. Today, I want to share my ideas about this and give you an opening into this topic and start your mind and also your heart thinking about this. My work. Now, let's start with the consciousness. First of all, what is the consciousness? The consciousness is what we are, who we are, how we feel, how we think. And the mystery about this is that science tells us that consciousness can be purely explained by calculation. So science today is actually taking the stance that consciousness is something that is purely based on calculations. It's like a biological computer, and that what we feel and that our experiences, our interpretations of reality, all of our depth that we can feel is purely an effect out of it, is some kind of an illusion. You could also see that as some kind of a self-deceptive process in the brain. But I'm heavily doubting that. Well, not a long time ago, I had the same view. I have to admit, I never really understood this position of science, and I just took it for granted. But I want to show you that there are many mysteries, basic, fundamental mysteries, that as long as we don't find out what it's about this, we cannot really state that the mind is just a computing engine. Now, let's start with something really interesting. A long time, we thought that everything regarding our consciousness is just happening in our brain. But in the last decades, first it started with the guts, that we realized that we have hundreds of millions of neurons around our guts, our colon, and that these guts, brain cells, like they are called today, are not just there for regulating our digestion. It's a location where many of our emotions are processed. Today, this is a proven fact, and it shows that the personality, our identity, and specifically our emotions are not just located in one place in the brain. And moreover, what is really interesting is that with patients that suffer from cancer in the colon and the ones that need surgery, when we take out a part of the colon, many of these people have afterwards a changed personality. They have a changed perception of emotions. And when our brain is the only location for our identity, for ourself, this wouldn't make that much sense. But what many people don't know is that there's even more to that story. Not a long time ago, we realized that in the heart, there is an area that consists of about 40,000 neurons that is today called the heart brain. In the beginning, we thought that these neurons are just there for regulating the heartbeat. And, it's just a pump. The heart is just a pump. That's what we all think. But when we look back into history, into literature, into spiritual teachings, many of these stories and reportings claimed that the heart is the seat of emotions. We don't really believe that anymore in most cases, but just think about yourself. When you suffer from emotional pain, you often feel your heart. We also say that in our language, that we have a heartbreak or that we have pain in the heart. And this is more than just metaphoric. Now, again, here, what we see with patients that have transplants of other people or that have an artificial heart is that they change their personality. And this change is often even more drastic. Let's take an example. When people replace their heart by an artificial heart, many of them report feeling completely detached from themselves, like they are living in a new body. They also report that they don't feel their emotions anymore. And more interestingly, when it comes to heart transplants, that people change their personality after the transplantation. In some cases, patients were going on a search for finding out who was the donor of the heart. And what they found out is that they suddenly had properties and personality traits of the donor of the heart. But that's still not all. The last new brain that we identified is in the sexual organs. The same is there. The brain cells in the sexual organs are much more doing than just regulating our sexual organs. They also have an emotional role and a deep impact when it comes to sexuality. So what we found out is that the brain is not the center of our self. It's not the center of our personality, of our mind. It's just one part in some kind of a distributed system. Now, this challenges the view that our identity is just an emerging property out of brain calculations. It seems to be much more complex, as we can see. But that's not all. Let's stay in the area of medicine, and let's look at one of the areas that is truly interesting. It's about anesthetics. Did you know that nobody can explain why anesthetics actually work? Yeah, really, it's true. Nobody can explain the mechanism of anesthetics. It's a kind of a mystery. We know that they work, and we know that they switch off our consciousness while not affecting the bodily functions. So when you get anesthetics for a surgery, for instance, your heartbeat, your breathing, your gut movement, everything that is needed for survival is still working properly without your consciousness being turned on. But your consciousness is completely switched off. And the interesting part is when you ever experienced how it feels like to be under anesthetics, it's completely different from sleep. Because when you sleep, you remember that you went to bed. And even if you don't remember what you did, you have a feeling of time passing by. But when you have anesthetics, it's like switch on, switch off. That's all. It happens from an instant. And you don't have any feeling of time. It's like you have been switched off and then switched on in a matter of seconds. Now, this is a really big mystery because if we don't even understand how anesthetics work and we claim that we understand the consciousness, there seems to be some kind of open question marks, right? Now let's go a little bit deeper and take the opposite of a human being in complexity. Let's take a single cell organism. My favorite one is the paramecium. The paramecium is a little one-celled organism that can move, that has cilia around its cell. So these little hair allow the paramecium to move freely and to swim in water mainly. Now, what is interesting about the paramecium is that this single-celled organism has quite some skill sets. First of all, it can swim around, it can go around obstacles, it can find food, it can escape dangers. But what is the most important and most fascinating part of it is that it can learn. It can learn. That is really something that nobody can explain. Let me explain you this, how they found out that the paramecium has learning capabilities. In an experiment, they put the paramecium into a water channel where there was a current flowing against it. And in the beginning, the little guy struggled a lot to actually fight against the stream, but then it compensated and started to swim quicker, to move its little arms, its little cilia quicker, and then adapted to the current. Now, while this is already quite impressive, the most impressive thing is afterwards, when they put it back into normal water, and then put it again into a channel of flowing water, it remembered it and it swam from the beginning quicker. Now, this is clearly a sign of learning because somehow this little organism was remembering in some way that in a current of water, it has to adapt the speed of its little arms. Now, nobody can explain that. And all the explanations that we have in science are lacking fundamentally. This is just like a hypothesis that scientists have that try to explain that with single cell processes, but it doesn't make any sense. Now, when we go to the research about consciousness, and the missing bits is that we have to see something. When we're really honest, is that the explanation of consciousness is not truly scientific because the theories that we have in science cannot be really explained. They cannot be experimentally proven. And this is one of the most important part of science, that when you have a hypothesis, then you have to make a setup where you have a test scenario, a kind of an experiment, and then you have to prove with the experiment that your hypothesis is correct. And then, not just that, you have to be able to repeat the experiment to get the same result. Now, this kind of setup is completely missing when it comes to consciousness. And that should be a strong sign that something is wrong in the kitchen. Something is burning in the kitchen, and we should actually look a little bit closer to it. Now, there have been many explanations about consciousness, but one of the most fascinating ones comes from a physicist and an anesthetist. Now, this is interesting because these two areas don't look like they have really a strong connection to each other. Now, Stuart Hammershoff is an anesthetist, difficult word, and he also had these questions because it's his profession and he cannot explain how consciousness works and how the switch off of the consciousness works. And he teamed up with Roger Penrose, one of the most famous and important physicists in the area of quantum physics. What they proposed and actually explored is that consciousness may be working on quantum effects and quantum physics. So it's not something that is working in this normal world. It's working in the world of the very, very, very small. Now, this theory has been rejected by the majority of scientists in the quantum field because it is more or less agreed in this community that quantum effects cannot take place in a medium that is watery, and the body is for sure watery, has body temperature. Normally, quantum physics only works in experimentation in temperature that are almost at the absolute 0 degree Kelvin, so where actually there is no real atomic vibration happening, and otherwise it breaks down. And so it was rejected. And this theory gained a lot of traction lately because experiments actually have proven that there are quantum effects taking place in our body and also in watery, warm environments. And there seems to be some fascinating regulating mechanism that makes it possible that these quantum effects stay stable. Now, why is it interesting that quantum physics could have an influence on our consciousness? Because what we have discovered is that these quantum effects take place in the neurons, specifically in the microtubuli of the neurons. These are structures that have several roles, but what we didn't know is that they could have an important role when it comes to consciousness. Because these microtubules are vibrating in a certain frequency. And interestingly, what the experiments have observed is that when you apply anesthetics, that these vibrations stop, they cease. And in this moment, the patient is subconscious, is no longer conscious. And this gives us a strong indication that there are these effects of quantum mechanics actually have some influence on our consciousness. Now, just this are many mysteries when it comes to consciousness, and it makes it difficult to really uphold the idea that the consciousness, the mind, can be just explained through physics. And after all, just look inside of yourself. Everything that you feel, Everything that is happening in your mind, in your soul, all of the varieties of your deep feelings, can they really be explained with a computer? That this is all calculation? Is this matching the depth of who we are? I doubt that deeply. And I think when we think about it and realize at the same time that there is no scientific explanation for all of that, just simplified, it is all an illusion, without realizing that what the illusion is makes it very difficult to believe that. Or think about dreams. Think about the richness of dreams. It's also explained with simple processes like the brain is cleaning, the brain is processing information, the brain is sorting out memories. But look at how complex dreams can be. Look at how multi-layered dreams can be, that you can have a dream in a dream in a dream, and you never realize, or almost never realize, that you're actually dreaming. And in a dream, however the situation is, how complex, how unrealistic, how surreal inside of the dream, you never realize it. What is the connection to that? There are so many mysteries when it comes to explain our soul, our mind, our consciousness, that we have to look deeper. And this is what I did. In my book, I explore these topics very deeply. And while I don't want to spoil all the fun for those who want to read the book, I want to look a little bit deeper in some of these areas that make consciousness one of the greatest mysteries that is still unsolved.